Imagine a discovery so significant that it threatens to rewrite history. Deep beneath the ruins of an ancient Roman outpost, buried under layers of time, archaeologists carefully unearth a sealed scroll. Its edges are brittle, its ink faded, but still legible. The name at the bottom sends shivers through the room: Pontius Pilate. His name is forever linked to one of the most defining events in human history, the trial and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Yet this is not a routine legal document or a report on Roman affairs. It is a personal letter, a first-hand account written in secrecy and sent to Emperor Tiberius himself. No gospel nor any historical record has ever recorded its contents until now. Pilate speaks of his first encounter with Jesus, describing a presence so overwhelming that it left even Rome's most hardened officials in awe. He documents supernatural occurrences that took place during and after the execution. He provides a detailed description of Jesus' face, a portrayal unlike any artistic depiction known today. And most disturbingly, he confesses that after everything he witnessed, he could no longer be certain whether Jesus was a mere man or something far beyond human understanding. He was not a man easily intimidated. As the Roman governor of Judea, he had seen war, rebellions, and death. He had ordered crucifixions without hesitation and governed a region known for its unrest. Yet, as he describes the events surrounding Jesus, a different emotion bleeds through the text. His account begins with an ordinary political matter, the arrival of a new preacher from Galilee who was drawing large crowds with his teachings. Pilate had dealt with so-called prophets before, often rebels in disguise using religion to incite resistance against Rome. But when he first saw Jesus, he knew this was no ordinary man. Standing before Pilate in the Praetorium, Jesus did not appear fearful, angry, or desperate, common reactions from those accused by Rome. Instead, he stood calm, composed, and strangely powerful. The soldiers who had dragged him in, men trained in battle, seemed uncomfortable in his presence. He describes an unsettling sensation, a weight in the air, an atmosphere that made even him, a representative of the empire, hesitate. He recalls the moment when he met Jesus' gaze, a moment that left him questioning everything he knew. His eyes, Pilate writes, did not belong to this world. The letter provides a startlingly detailed description of Jesus' face, contradicting traditional depictions found in religious art. He writes that Jesus' hair was not dark and coarse, but soft, wavy and light in color, golden when caught in the sunlight. His eyes were unlike any he had seen, so deep, so piercing that they seemed to hold 1,000 years of wisdom. Witnesses described them differently. Some saw light blue, others a burning amber, but all agreed that no one could look into them without feeling profoundly seen. His skin was fairer than expected, his features symmetrical and striking. He was tall, with an air of quiet authority, not just in posture, but in presence. Even in chains, he appeared more like a ruler than the governors who judged him. He admits that he had never encountered a man who radiated such a sense of certainty, even in the face of death. He details the execution in disturbing clarity, but his fear grows strongest after Jesus takes his last breath. The sky, which had been clear, suddenly darkens. A violent earthquake shakes the land, splitting the great temple in two. Soldiers whisper in terror, some collapsing to their knees. Witnessing the moment, a centurion mutters words that a Roman officer should never speak. Truly, this was the Son of God. He watches as the city of Jerusalem falls silent, not with relief, but with an unexplainable heaviness. Even the executioners, men who had taken countless lives, hesitate before lowering his lifeless body from the cross. 3 days later, the tomb remains empty. The guards, stationed there under Pilate's own orders, are trembling wrecks. They report seeing a brilliant light, voices speaking from nowhere, and a figure walking through solid stone as if it were air. Pilate's final words in the letter reveal a man at war with his own beliefs. Despite his authority and loyalty to Rome, Pilate confesses that he does not believe Jesus was an ordinary man, and that is why this letter had to remain hidden. Pilate was a man of law, of empire, of absolute control. Yet, the words in this letter betray a mind haunted by what it witnessed. He knew that Rome would never accept the idea that a crucified Jew could be anything more than a political nuisance. He understood that the emperor, the Senate, and the people of Rome would never allow the belief that something divine had walked among them. Therefore, they buried the letter. Official Roman archives never recorded it. Court documents never referenced it. It was erased from history until now. Pilate's position in Judea was far from secure. In his own words, he describes the province as the most rebellious he'd ever ruled. It wasn't just the people. It was their leaders, the high priests, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. These groups didn't just oppose Roman rule, they also fought among themselves for power. Pilate saw them as cunning manipulators who would do anything to maintain their authority, even at the expense of their own people. But he had a bigger problem. He had only 1 centurion and 100 soldiers to maintain control over a region teetering on the brink of revolt. The governor of Syria denied his request for reinforcements. With such limited resources, he had to tread carefully, knowing that one wrong move could ignite a rebellion Rome couldn't afford. Pilate first hears of Jesus of Nazareth through rumors. At first, he assumes Jesus is just another troublemaker stirring up dissent against Rome. But as he investigates further, he discovers that Jesus isn't rallying the people against Rome. Instead, his teachings challenge the hypocrisy and corruption of the Jewish leaders, the very people who claim to represent the divine law. Remember to join our community by subscribing to this channel. In his letter to Emperor Tiberius, Pilate recalls his first direct encounter with Jesus. The encounter took place during the Passover, when Jerusalem was bustling with pilgrims. Pilate arrested Jesus and brought him before him, accusing him of blasphemy and threatening the authority of the Jewish temple. When Jesus stood before him, he expected to see fear or defiance. Instead, he saw a man who radiated calm, whose very presence unsettled him. Pilate expressed, "Upon his appearance, I experienced a sensation of my feet becoming immobile on the marble floor. I was shaking all over like someone guilty." Jesus spoke little, but his words carried the weight of eternity. When Pilate asked him about his kingdom, Jesus simply replied, "My kingdom is not of this world." He knew immediately that this man posed no political threat to Rome, but there was something deeper, something almost supernatural about him. His dilemma deepened when the Jewish leaders and the crowd began to demand Jesus' crucifixion. They accused Pilate of conspiring with Jesus to weaken their authority. "Crucify him!" they shouted louder and louder, until it seemed like the entire city was screaming for blood. He tried to reason with them, reminding them of their own laws, which required fasting and deliberation before sentencing someone to death. He even suggested releasing Jesus as part of the Passover tradition, but the crowd, likely bribed and manipulated by the high priests, refused to relent. Then came the fear trigger that shook Pilate to his core. His wife, Claudia Procula, had a dream the night before, warning him not to harm Jesus. She told him that this man was innocent and that condemning him would bring great misfortune to their family and Rome itself. He was already conflicted, but this warning made him feel as though the gods themselves were intervening. Despite his reservations, Pilate felt trapped. If he spared Jesus, he risked angering the Jewish leaders and inciting a revolt that Rome would blame him for. If he condemned Jesus, he would forever bear the guilt of killing an innocent man. Pilate tried one last act to absolve himself. In front of the crowd, he washed his hands in a basin of water, symbolically declaring that he was not responsible for Jesus' death. People have viewed Pontius Pilate in a variety of ways throughout Christian history. In many Western Christian traditions, he is portrayed as the man who condemned Jesus to die, the one who could have stopped the crucifixion but didn't. Because of this, he is often considered a villain, someone who had power but was too weak to use it for good. However, other Christian traditions, particularly those in Eastern Christianity, perceive him in a more nuanced light. Instead of just a villain, some view him as a tragic figure, someone caught between his duty to the Roman Empire and his own sense of justice. Some parts of Christianity actually honor him as a saint. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, both he and his wife are considered saints. They believe that he later regretted what he had done and became a follower of Jesus. According to Ethiopian Christian tradition, Pilate realized too late that Jesus was truly the Son of God. He tried to warn the Roman authorities, but they ignored him. Some stories even assert that he faced exile and dedicated the remainder of his life to repentance for his actions. Most people are accustomed to hearing about him from a very different perspective. Instead of being just the man who allowed Jesus to be crucified, he is seen as someone who eventually understood the truth and changed because of it. Even if someone doesn't know much about him, they have likely heard his name in one of the most important Christian statements of faith, the Nicene Creed. For over 1,600 years, churches worldwide have recited this creed. It says, "He suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried." This single line means that every time Christians declare their faith, they remember his role in the story. His name is forever connected to the suffering and death of Jesus. Many historians and theologians believe that including him in the creed was a way to show that Jesus' crucifixion was a real historical event, not just a story. By linking Jesus' death to an actual Roman governor, it grounded the Christian faith in history. Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian who lived in the 1st century, wrote about Pilate in his historical works. The Jewish people did not like Pilate, according to Josephus. He ruled with a heavy hand, often making decisions that led to unrest and even rebellion. One of the most well-known incidents was when Pilate introduced images of the Roman emperor into Jerusalem. This was a huge mistake. Placing the emperor's likeness in their holy city was deeply insulting to the Jewish people, who had strict religious beliefs against graven images. This led to an enormous protest, with crowds refusing to back down. He eventually removed the images, but the damage to his reputation was done. He was seen as insensitive to the religious customs of the people he governed. Are you enjoying the story? Support our channel by clicking the subscribe button. Josephus also describes how he used temple funds to build an aqueduct, another decision that angered the people. When they protested, he responded with violence, sending disguised soldiers into the crowd to attack and kill the demonstrators. This act cemented his image as a harsh ruler, one who wouldn't hesitate to use force against those who opposed him. Another Jewish writer, Philo of Alexandria, had an even harsher view of Pilate. He described him as a man who was brutal, greedy, and corrupt. According to Philo, Pilate was guilty of numerous crimes, including extortion, unjust executions, and acts of extreme cruelty. Philo's writings suggest that he had no regard for justice. Instead of being a fair ruler, he was accused of exploiting the Jewish people, using his position for personal gain. He portrays him as an arrogant ruler who disregarded the customs and laws of the land he was responsible for governing. This image of Pilate as a cruel leader is quite different from the hesitant and uncertain man we see in the biblical accounts of Jesus' trial. While the Bible portrays Pilate as reluctant to execute Jesus, Philo paints a picture of a man who had no problem using violence and oppression to maintain control. Not all accounts of Pilate come from Jewish sources. The Roman historian Tacitus, writing in the early 2nd century, also mentioned Pilate. The significance of Tacitus's writings lies in their confirmation of a crucial historical fact: Pilate's rule over Jesus' crucifixion. In his book Annals, Tacitus refers to Christus, the founder of Christianity, who was executed during the reign of Emperor Tiberius under the authority of Pontius Pilate. This is one of the earliest non-Christian references to Jesus, proving that his crucifixion was a real historical event. Unlike Josephus and Philo, Tacitus does not focus on Pilate's personality or actions as a governor. Instead, he simply records the fact that he carried out the execution of Jesus, an event that would later lead to the rise of Christianity. For centuries, historians debated whether Pilate was a real person or just a character from biblical and historical writings. Then, in 1961, a groundbreaking discovery provided physical proof of his existence. Archaeologists uncovered a stone inscription in the ancient city of Caesarea Maritima, a major Roman port in Judea. This stone, known as the Pilate inscription, contained the name Pontius Pilatus and referred to him as the prefect of Judea. This was an incredible find because it was the first known archaeological evidence confirming his historical existence and his official title. Pilate's story is a reminder that history is never simple. Different people see the same events in different ways. Some view him as a villain, others as a man caught in an impossible situation. His decisions, whether cruel or calculated, change the course of history. But perhaps the most haunting part of Pilate's legacy is that despite all his power, he could not escape his own moment of weakness. Whether through fear, political pressure, or indifference, he made a choice that ensured his name would be remembered forever. One of the most defining events in human history will always be associated with Pontius Pilate's name. He was neither a prophet nor a king, but a Roman governor whose actions, whether by choice, pressure, or fate, determined the course of history. His rule over Judea was marked by tension, political maneuvering, and an iron grip, but it is his role in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ that has cemented his legacy for over 2 millennia. His leadership was defined by a delicate balance between enforcing Roman law and managing the volatile religious climate of Judea. Ancient historians such as Josephus and Philo recorded his severe and sometimes brutal methods, depicting a man who struggled to maintain order in a province resistant to Roman control. His governance was not remembered for fairness or wisdom, but for his rigid enforcement of imperial rule, his clashes with the Jewish authorities, and his inability to prevent violent uprisings. The introduction of emperor images into Jerusalem, the misuse of temple funds, and his suppression of protests further fueled the resentment of those he ruled. In the biblical story, he appears as a man torn between justice and duty. His interaction with Jesus was unlike any trial he had overseen. He recognized Jesus' innocence, attempted to free him, and even presented alternatives to the angry crowd demanding crucifixion. Yet his own fears dictated his final decision. The warnings from his wife, Claudia Procula, added to his growing uncertainty. Despite his authority, he ultimately conceded to public pressure, ensuring Jesus' execution. The moment he washed his hands before the crowd, attempting to absolve himself of responsibility, became a symbol of moral weakness, an attempt to escape accountability for a choice that could not be undone. If you are enjoying this content, please consider clicking on Super Thanks. This way you will be encouraging the creation of stories like this. The Roman historian Tacitus confirms his involvement in Jesus' crucifixion, affirming his historical presence beyond religious texts. Yet, for all the power he wielded, he failed to control his own destiny. The discovery of the Caesarea inscription provided archaeological evidence of his title as prefect of Judea, proving his existence beyond historical records. His legacy varies across different traditions. In Western Christianity, he is often remembered as the symbol of injustice, the man who could have prevented the crucifixion but chose to prioritize his own security. His failure to uphold justice in a moment of great consequence casts him as a weak leader, a ruler whose hesitation changed the world. However, Eastern traditions, especially the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, view Pilate differently. Every time churches around the world recite the Nicene Creed, they continue to speak his name, deeply ingrained in Christian tradition. It is a name that represents the collision of divine will and earthly power, of human frailty and historical inevitability. Despite the rise and fall of empires and the forgetting of rulers, Pilate's decision remains a defining moment, inextricably linked to the crucifixion of Jesus. The world remembers him not as a governor of Rome, but as the man who, knowingly or unknowingly, played a key role in an event that shaped human history. His story endures as a testament to the choices that define legacies, proving that even the most powerful cannot escape the consequences of their actions. Thanks for watching. Join our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.